Hello everybody! So, a couple of days ago my mom had a vlog on YouTube where she talks about taking children and family to Sweden when you immigrate to Sweden, and what to think about when you take children with you. Now, I am my parents' child and I got to come with them. So, let's talk about that. But first, why don't you subscribe? You don't miss any of my videos. It's for free. You can always change your mind. Alright, now let's get to this vlog. My mom talked about the experience of taking children to Sweden. Now, when we moved to Sweden in 2012, low branches, hold on. Alright, anyway, before we actually moved to Sweden, my parents and I had a lot of vacations in Sweden. And for me, that made it a lot more easier when they actually told me they wanted to move to Sweden. All these vacations in Sweden just gave me a feel for the country. They let me know what I was gonna see when I was moving there. And I just got a lot more familiar with Sweden itself. And then at some point, my parents bought a vacation house in Sweden. This was in 2005. So all this was a pretty gradual getting to know Sweden experience for me. Like, our first vacation in Sweden, I believe, was in 2000. Then 5 years later, my parents bought a vacation house in Sweden. And then 7 years later, after that, me and my parents moved to Sweden. So it was a very gradual experience, and I think that's a good thing. It is pretty good that they slowly, let me know about Sweden and slowly took me along on that adventure. Again, I was an adult already. I think the timing was pretty good because I was at the end of my university. I was at the end of my university degree, I was going to the Haagse Hogeschool. And the last year is already a year you're very busy. And during that last year, you lose a lot of friends already because all my friends were doing their degrees and having their exams. And after that, everybody starts their own life. So the timing was just pretty good. So this meant that when I was leaving for Sweden with my parents, I wasn't really losing that many friends because, all the relationships were already, watering away. I think if you take your children to Sweden, you might as well time it for a transitional period. What do I mean with a transitional period? Like, if your children are in school and they are reaching that age that they need to go to the next school, I think that is a good moment to take them to a different country, because that way, they're going to lose friends anyway. They're going to lose social contacts anyway, because they're going to change schools. So that way it's not that much of a social impact for them. Now, something that's good to know is that my parents never forced me to come with them to Sweden. They just, after this long period of going to Sweden on vacations, having a vacation house and everything, they asked me if I wanted to come. They said to me, like, "Hey Steve, soon you're going to be done with your degree, and me and your dad are planning to move to Sweden. Do you want to come, or do you want to stay in Holland?" And one of the more important things they told me back then is, I have to exchange hands, my hands are getting cold. one of the more important things they said is like, the choice is yours to come with us or stay, but don't answer right now. Give us an answer in a while. Think about it first. And I did have to think about it. I had to weigh stuff like, okay, if I go with them, I am gonna lose all my social contacts, but if I stay here, I lose my parents. But also, my parents not directly said it out loud, but in subtle ways they kind of let me know what it would be like to stay in Holland. It was pretty obvious for me that staying in Holland would be economically not a good decision for me. I would economically be better off being in Sweden. Now for me personally, and this is different for every person, I like nature a lot. And that makes it easier for me to move to Sweden because, you know, nature. And your children might not like nature as much, but the aspect of being closer to nature and having all this space and freedom was very alluring to me. So I think the 3 things my parents did right to help me move to Sweden were: 1, they slowly introduced me to Sweden over a long period of time. Lots of vacations, a vacation house, and then years later we actually moved. Now, number 2 is they timed it correctly. They timed it in such a way that it would be during a transitional period for my life anyway, the period where I'm done studying and starting to have to look for a job. And the 3rd good thing is that, you know, they kind of told me about the advantages and disadvantages of staying in Holland or moving with them to Sweden. And it's important to talk about all the disadvantages too, you know. I knew from the start that moving with my parents to Sweden, I would have to stay living with them for a lot longer than I was planning to. I mean, I was 25, and moving to Sweden meant I would have to live with them for a lot longer time, while most people would have already moved out of their parents' house, or they would move out of their parents' house right after they're done studying and get a new job. So these kinds of decisions, you need to give your kids all the information. Don't hold back any information because you want them to come, because that way you're only going to set it up for failure, because someday they're going to find out and be angry. Now, what was it like for me once we actually moved to Sweden? First off, it was, you know, quite hectic. You need to move all your stuff and your life to a different country. Then once we've settled down, you know, you kind of make the house ready, you start renovating, and there's not really a break. You don't have a job, you're not going to school, and normal life didn't really continue for a while. It was very different for me because, you know, I was done studying, and after that you start working. I didn't start working directly because I couldn't get a job. I did look for jobs, but it was hard getting one. So it was weird. I was stuck in some kind of little limbo there. Done studying, but haven't really got a job. So helping my parents renovate that vacation house into an actual permanent house, and job searching all the time. Now, luckily, my mom did all the paperwork for us moving to Sweden. She did all the administrative stuff to let us move to Sweden. And I didn't have to think about that. She wanted me to think about that, but I didn't. I had other things going on. But yeah, I'm very thankful for her doing that. So I would say if you take your children to Sweden or to any other country, make it as easy for them as possible. That way they don't have, things to say like, aha, I see, I didn't want to move, and now you have this. I mean, I would say if they don't want to move, don't take them anyway, but making it as easy as possible for them is going to help a lot. Because most likely in this story, moving to Sweden is your idea, not theirs. And then I think you should make it as easy for them as possible, and don't tell them like, well, you moved to Sweden, so you do your own paperwork. I mean, true that they need to grow up and learn to do paperwork. But if it's your decision to move to Sweden, don't make them do that. I'm not saying that's what happened with me and my parents, because I decided myself I wanted to come with them. But I can imagine that for younger children, like kids that just turned 16 or 18 or anything like that, they will appreciate it, not at the moment, but in the future they will appreciate that you have done that for them, like I did. And suddenly, I don't know how this happened, I'm on some train tracks. I decided to walk a new route to see where it would end up, and apparently on some train tracks. Don't do this, people, but I'm gonna walk along these and see where I end up. So yeah, moving to Sweden was a lot of work for my parents and for me. Like, I needed to learn the language before I could get a job, and job searching was not easy at all. But in the end I did get a job and we did get settled. Now, emotionally, how was it for me moving to Sweden? The first 3 years were kind of tough, I would say. I was very happy every time we drove anywhere because I got to see the country I moved to. And Sweden is a beautiful country. But emotionally, apart from knowing that I'm in a beautiful country... Sorry, I'm just trying to listen to trains. So every sound I'm reacting to. Anyway, yeah. In 3 years' time, my dad kind of got homesick. And that's normal. Nothing wrong with that. But that influenced my feelings too. Because I decided, like, hey, I like Sweden so much, I want to stay here now. And when my parents were talking about maybe moving back to Holland for a little bit, that really hit me hard. It's like, hey, you asked me to come, I came, I uprooted my life in Holland, and now you maybe want to go back? That was pretty hard. That was difficult. Luckily, they decided that they didn't want to move back to Holland, which I'm very thankful for, because I think if they would have moved back to Holland, I would have stayed in Sweden. So I'm not blaming my dad for this at all. I mean, it's just the way life goes. You move to a different country, you don't know the language, you're gonna get homesick, you're gonna feel lonely, and just making sure there's no trains. And it's natural for him to become homesick. I'm not saying that your children are gonna go through this, but I am saying it's gonna be emotional. If you move to a different country, it's such a big change. You're gonna run into difficult moments. And this goes for your children too. It's gonna be difficult. And you need to tell them this up front, so that they know it's gonna happen. There you go. I only had like 5 seconds to react. Yep. Alright, now I know there's not going to be train for a little bit, most likely. Still going to listen though. I heard it behind me, jumped off the rails and only could turn my camera on just in time to see the tail end of that train. Anyway, where was I? Now, I'm not saying that you or your children are going to get homesick. All I'm saying, it's going to be difficult. I don't think there's such a thing as moving to a different country without emotions running high. It's just going to happen. So what can you do to mediate that? What can you do to make it easier? Well, if your children are going to go to school in Sweden, that is one thing that is going to make it easier, because they're going to be making new friends. If they're not going to go to school, give them another opportunity to make friends. Do they like a sport? Enroll them into that sport. Do they have other hobbies? Make sure that you find a group of people they can do those hobbies with. And like my mom said in her vlog, make the decision to move somewhere where children have opportunities to make social interactions. Like, if your kid is into football, or the Americans call it soccer, and you move somewhere where it's 2 hours drive to get to the nearest football club, then what are you doing? Of course it's going to be difficult for your kids to make social contacts. So, yes, move somewhere where your kids can also get social contacts. This might not be your dream location, but if your dream is to have your kids with you, you're going to have to compromise. Okay, some kind of station-like area, and I don't have to walk between the rails anymore. That makes me feel a little bit safer. Anyway, once we got settled in, and once my parents decided we're staying in Sweden as well, life got really easy. I mean, it was this 3-year startup period that just made it difficult. But once I started speaking the language, once I got a full-time job and started making social contact with people and settling into, life in Sweden, yeah, I love it here now. I'm never moving back to Holland. I'm staying in Sweden. And that's a conscious decision. That didn't happen on accident. Once we were living in Sweden for just 1 year, the first year, I remember talking to some other Dutch people that had moved to Sweden. And when he asked us, how long have you been living in Sweden? We said, oh, just 1 year. And he said, oh, okay, so you're still de-stressing then. And that was kind of funny to us then, but today that makes a lot more sense. Those first 3 years are just gonna feel stressful. There's so much to do, so much of your life that you're uprooting and then starting a new life in Sweden. That just takes time. And I really hope that for you and your kids, that goes a lot faster than 3 years. For us, it could have gone faster, but for certain reasons that my mom can tell you about a lot more than me, we couldn't get a person's number that fast. It took us a long time to get a person's number. That meant that we couldn't go to school to start learning Swedish, and without Swedish we couldn't get a job. So if you prepare yourself a lot better, you might be able to get a person's number a lot sooner and make all this go a lot faster. I think for your children, it's gonna be easier to make social contacts if they also understand the Swedish culture a lot better. Because for me it was like, I'm a friendly person, I'm trying to make social contact with these Swedish people, why aren't they becoming friends? If I knew how the Swedish culture worked from the beginning, I think I would have made friends a lot easier. Or known that it's not that important to make friends real quick. Swedish people take time to make friends with, the older they get. But yeah, I think the most important things for taking your kids to Sweden are involving them into the process, letting them get to know Sweden long before you actually move to Sweden, and moving during a transitional process. Don't take them out of school just in the middle of the school year. Take them to Sweden at a moment that they're gonna move from school to school anyway. And I think that helps a lot. So I hope this video helps. I just wanted to react to my mom's video and give you guys some more information about how it felt for me. Ow, that stone was loose. Look at it. That was loose. My foot went like me. My foot went sideways. Feels sad for me. Anyway, yes. So to summarize even more, it was a very difficult process to move to Sweden, but very much worth it in the end. And, you know, involve your kids in everything, let them get to know Sweden, move during a transitional time. And I think that's the best advice I can give you from my experience. I hope it helped, and I'm gonna find a way to get off these train tracks. And I'll see you all next time. Bye! I got off the train tracks safely. Don't walk on train tracks, people, that's stupid. I only had like 4 or 5 seconds to get off when the train was coming, and I barely heard it coming, so that was kinda stupid. Be safe, bye! YouTube says you might enjoy this video. Go ahead and give it a try.